In southern Ohio and northern West Virginia, the legend of Mothman is as strong as it was 45 years ago.
And this is where all of your Mothman sightings started back in '66, November '66.
Jeff Wamsley gives tours showing people where the legendary 7-foot-tall winged man with glowing red eyes the size of baseballs was spotted at least 100 times between November 1966 through December of 1967. He also runs a Mothman museum. The first witnesses were two couples together at a town gathering spot, the power plant, which sounds like a lover's lane of the late 1960s.
As they got up closer, she said, "What is this guy doing standing in the road?" And she said when the headlights hit it, it turned and looked at him. And she said the wings were like angel's wings above its head, way above its head. And she said that's when the wings came out. And they said that's not a man.
They say Mothman chased their car at incredible speeds. The women were said to be hospitalized for shock. The witnesses all described the same thing, a faceless, red-eyed freak who seemed to have a message to tell. But what was this message? Carolyn Marcella runs the local diner. Her sister saw Mothman, but won't do interviews. In fact, most people won't do interviews.
And it flew over top of her, and she looked up, and she said, when I seen them big red eyes, she said, we were out of there. Can't tell you what the rest of it looks like.
A lot of respectable business people, young kids, older people, elderly. But the people that I've talked to, they just said, we're afraid that people would laugh at us and, think that we were crazy. But, they said we know what we saw, and some of them said that it was a large bird of some sort. Others said it wasn't a bird.
How can any of this be explained? Critics say these sightings are really misidentified planes. Owls are just plain pranks. This is an area of chemical plants and military ammunition storage.
Somebody was up here fishing one day, saw this fluorescent green stuff coming out of the water, sort of like Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies.
Could it have been some type of mutated bird, a 50s and 60s sci-fi fear? Or was Mothman really here to warn the river people? Do you believe it?
I believe they saw something, yeah. I don't doubt their stories one bit. I mean, what it was, I can't tell you, personally what it was. I know that they saw something that was out of the ordinary.
Something those witnesses will never forget.
Final installment this season of the Paranormal West Virginia is now available. It's at our website. And in this episode, reporter Shayla Klein visited Point Pleasant, uncovering the legend behind the Mothman.
In many ways, Mothman has become West Virginia's favorite cryptid. The creature is recognizable to most of us between the black wings and the beady red eyes. And while no one knows the origin story behind Mothman, many have speculated that he mutated in TNT chemicals at West Virginia Ordnance Works. We are now standing in front of what locals call the igloo. That's where Mothman was first sighted. The igloos were created to store TNT, but have since been abandoned. Mothman Museum employee Brittany Sayers says her grandfather was one of the National Guardsmen that initially saw Mothman at the TNT area.
He and another guy that he worked with were out there working on a vehicle and saw this big thing in the tree. And he came home, told my nanny about it, my grandma, and of course, you just had to know her. She was like, "You're crazy. If you tell people you saw that, they're going to think you're crazy." So he never talked about it.
Mothman was famously seen near or on the Silver Bridge right before the collapse in 1967. After that moment, people were split on whether Mothman was good or evil. Some speculated that Mothman caused the collapse somehow, while others speculated he was just trying to warn people of impending doom.
In many ways, he is both, because there's no actual proof that he caused the collapse. He could have just been saying, "Hey, it's going to happen, look out. I'm up here on the bridge pointing out the brake."
But regardless of if Mothman is a hero or a villain, his popularity has expanded around the world and brought a lot of tourism to Point Pleasant. Sarah says that while there's always some locals who aren't a big fan, most of the people in the town are all for the Mothman theme.
Before Mothman things took off around here, it was pretty much dead. Like, even when I was growing up, Main Street was empty. And now we've got shops in the buildings, and people are coming in, and it's thriving again, thank goodness. So a lot of people are glad about that.
Point Pleasant has plenty of Mothman food, shopping, and activities for the whole family. For WBOY, I'm Shayla Klein in Point Pleasant.
Say main menu. Mothman Mania is a story from our own Bill Geist, all about the creepy creature who's giving rival phantoms a run for their money.
The Loch Ness Monster, the Abominable Snowman, Bigfoot, move over. Mothman is here. We'll travel to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and hear tales of a growing legend that has inspired books, movies, and pizzas later on Sunday morning.
Bill Flanagan of MTV treats us to some of the best music of the new season. The Chicago Cubs are now champs.
CSI Comes Cold Case premieres CBS tonight after 60 Minutes.
Although Mothman Mania hasn't swept the whole country yet, it is well entrenched in one particular corner of it. So we sent our Bill Geist to investigate.
Where the Kanawha River flows into the Ohio sits Point Pleasant, West Virginia. A quiet little town, changed forever when folks started seeing things. Weird, scary things.
That thing jumped on top of the car, squatted and looked like this into the windshield through us.
I thought, well, it's just going to reach down and pick me up, and this is it.
We looked at it and backed up and then turned and run.
It was 80 miles an hour, and that thing was still running beside the car.
The story began on November 15, 1966, when two young married couples drove through an abandoned explosives facility and happened upon a 7-foot winged humanoid with two huge glowing red eyes. The thing, dubbed Mothman, created quite a stir.
I immediately came here intending to spend like 24 hours.
Little did you know.
Little did I know that it was like turning into a career for me.
Journalist John Keel led the howling media pack that set upon Point Pleasant for this real grabber of a story.
I met a lot of very believable people here who'd seen this thing, some of them fairly close.
They said the creature looked a lot like this. A statue of Mothman unveiled recently in downtown Point Pleasant to kick off the Mothman Festival. The town hopes the creature that once scared people off will now bring them in. So far, so good. Would you eat that? Me either.
And we came all the way from Indiana for this. We came from Cincinnati for this.
Yeah, baby. Oh, very elusive, this Mothman.
People come here from London, Germany, Japan.
Jeff Wamsley and Donnie Sargent have a whole Mothman industry going. They wrote a book, printed T-shirts, established a website. The townsfolk seem right proud of their Mothman.
England has the Loch Ness Monster, and we have the Mothman.
The first sighting was right in there. Almost all the sightings took place way back in 1966 and 67.
That was the big thing to do, just run around and drink beer on the weekends and chase the Mothman.
Although some sightings continue to this day.
Well, I saw just red eyes. Just
Only 30 feet above you.
Yes, 30 feet above us.
My
Yes.
God.
It was very.
Why didn't you whip out your camera?
Well, we were in shock.
Interest was rekindled with the publication of John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies, followed by last year's movie starring Richard Gere.
What do you do when someone comes into your office and tells you they saw this in their backyard?
The interesting thing about this case is that most of those who say they saw Mothman seem to be salt-of-the-earth types who had nothing to gain by telling their stories except embarrassment.
There's a lot of people who've seen things up there who've never came to the authorities or wanted to say anything about it.
You're the first person in the news that I've told this to.
Yeah, you have an exclusive on this. Back then, they made fun of you, you know. Oh, my gracious, you know. How many beers did you have?
And they're sticking by their stories.
I'll take a lie detector test on what I saw.
So it's not like you heard somebody else's story. And
No, this is our story because we saw it.
But who is this guy? Theories have abounded. A biochemical mutation, a space alien, or perhaps the embodiment of a 200-year-old curse by Shawnee Chief Cornstalk.
Well, there are theories that the government used mind control on this town back in the 60s.
The Frick brothers here take an unusual interest in Mothman.
We consider ourselves paranormal investigators.
This drug and alcohol counselor has her own theory.
Well, you know, we're in West Virginia. There could be stills somewhere.
But my favorite theory comes from this Earthling who spotted spaceships during the Mothman sighting. Well, do you think these ships that Mothman may have been on one of those ships?
Could have been. I tell you, it might have been a pet that got loose from him or something. Or,
No. Mothman might have been the pet of one of the aliens?
Yeah, could have been. You know, like we have dogs and cats for pets and stuff like that. You know, that's just a theory.
And a good theory, as good as any. And there was a rash of UFO sightings along with the Mothman encounters. Some even blame Mothman and the UFOs for the collapse of their bridge, which killed 46 people.
I'm going to come and sit with you.
Good for you. Great. The Mothman Festival continued into the night when folks stood in line for hours to take guided hayride tours through the abandoned TNT facility that was Mothman's lair.
Now, I've talked to a few people who went into the buildings, heard the wings flapping.
Oh, really? And a few brave souls went out on their own looking for Mothman, armed only with maps and flashlights. What are those dogs barking at? It was a little scary. What with a huge winged monster out there? Mothman. Here, Mothman. Here, Mothman. Could those be the lights of the UFO they were talking about? Dropping off Mothman? That's ridiculous, but I keep hearing these voices.
I know they saw something.
What it was, I don't know. It was big.
Like nothing I've ever seen before.
I knew he was for real, whatever he was.
And the biggest, reddest eyes you've ever did see.
Remembering those lost in the tragic Silver Bridge collapse in Point Pleasant. It happened 55 years ago tonight, claiming 46 lives. 13 News reporter Lane Ball spoke with their loved ones tonight. He has the story.
An event that left so many heartbroken. December 15th, 1967. 55 years ago, the Silver Bridge collapsed during rush hour traffic. The bridge, which crossed over the Ohio River, connecting Point Pleasant and Gallipolis, collapsed due to a small defect on a single I-bar in a suspension chain. Later, this led to important changes for the future of bridge construction, prompting the adoption of National Bridge Inspection Standards in 1968. But for families all over the tri-state, they lost loved ones that tragic day. And Thursday, a crowd of people gathered to remember their names.
Christy Ann Bowles.
This tragedy has affected so many in this community, and I actually spoke with one woman who was the daughter of one of the 46 people who were named tonight, and she says it's still heartbreaking to this day.
I lost my mom on the bridge. I was 23 years old.
Roxy Stover says her mother, Nora Isabel Nybert, was driving across the bridge when it collapsed. She says after they heard the news, they immediately got in the car and drove to Point Pleasant.
The drive down here that night was absolutely eerie. The bridge went down on Friday, and we found my mom on Sunday. There was some that was ever found.
A tragedy many wish never happened. But in honor of those 46 names, this community is making sure it's never forgotten.
I want to impress upon those beyond the years of myself to forget this.
Reporting in Point Pleasant, I'm Lane Ball for 13 News.
I don't care if you think I'm Satan reincarnated. The fact is, you can't look at that television and say, nothing happened.